Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Smith. I'm from Arizona State University. Thank you for coming this morning. I'd like to talk a little bit about eye tracking and some of the reasons that we're using eye tracking in call research, and also touch on some of the key questions that eye tracking can help us answer. So, eye tracking is a useful tool in providing information about what learners are actually doing when they're interacting in an online environment, and helping us to not rely on what they say they do, or on what publishers say they will do, or even on what our theory tells us that they're likely to do, or on what the affordances of certain software suggests that they might do. It allows us to provide a more data-driven record, and make more data-driven decisions. Eye tracking is just one form of tracking learner behavior, and it's perfectly in line with this recent push for more multimodal methods of data collection and analysis. So the literature really does show a trend away from relying on what some have called impoverished records of learner interaction, such as employing only chat transcripts when analyzing learner online interaction. For example, Seedhouse and Saad 2009 argue that task-based interaction is very difficult to analyze, largely because of its highly indexical nature. And they employed Transana 3 software to align video, audio, and tabletop computer screen records with the transcripts of the interaction on a single screen. And by doing so, they're able to make 3 data sources available simultaneously for multimodal analysis. Satomi Suzuki recently drew on conversation analysis and focusing on one L2 student's off-screen behavior while engaged in SCMC with classmates and with the teacher. The class was mediated by the audio-based conferencing system WIMBA, where class participants' behaviors in their physical environments were not observable to others. The student's off-screen behavior suggested that she gained significant affordances from the course format, namely opportunities to freely take her private turns by vocalizing the language off-screen without being heard, thus illustrating the potential of computer-based learning to promote increased learner agency and autonomy. So, as we strive to employ more rigorous and multimodal methods of data collection and analysis, my view is that this can only help strengthen this nexus between SLA and call. So, in other words, conducting call research that is firmly grounded in some current SLA theory. So when we talk about eye tracking, it's really in line with this multiple modality approach, and researchers like Bethany O'Rourke have recently offered eye tracking as a richer source of what learners actually do, or in this case, view during SCMC interaction. Indeed, as pointed out by Alina Gottfried and colleagues, eye tracking as a data collection technique seems less likely than, say, think-alouds to interfere with the participant's cognitive processing. Also, since it is an online measure, it may be more robust in some ways than retrospective techniques such as stimulated recall. For example, CMC eye tracking research is appearing in more edited collections as well as in current issues of mainstream applied linguistics journals, such as the current issue of SSLA, which is devoted to studies employing eye tracking. Of course, there are no call-based studies in that group, but it shows a trend. In fact, as the cost of eye tracking hardware and software systems come down, I expect that we'll see more of this kind of work. There seem to be several immediate applications for eye tracking in call research. Of course, the most obvious is to use eye tracking in a sort of usability testing way, that is, to get a record of what learners view while interacting with software. This actually takes us beyond what simple click tracking can do in a human-computer interaction environment. We're seeing the application of eye tracking in human-human interactional settings as well, namely text-based SCMC. Now, the data analysis in this environment is quite challenging. In this context, we might use eye tracking to confirm or disconfirm the efficacy of other more established data collection methods in SLA, such as stimulated recall, think-alouds, measures of learner uptake, etc. And in this case, the eye tracking record could be used to triangulate what learners seem to attend to in the linguistic input and in their own output. That is, since the eye tracking record shows precisely how long learners spend focusing on a specific target item, these records could help researchers verify and interpret stimulated recall records of noticing during SCMC, for example. Alternatively, the eye tracking record could show that learners likely did attend at some level to a target structure in the input, where other methods of data collection cannot show this. So tracking an aspect of student behavior during SCMC through eye tracking might help us inform some of the contentious debates in SLA. For example, those surrounding the notions of attention, noticing, and awareness. For example, what learners are likely or able to attend to, or the effectiveness of implicit and explicit negative feedback in a task-based CMC environment. Frankly, I'm not sure what eye tracking will be able to tell us in the final analysis, but I do think that it has some potential to be very helpful as a research tool in CALL, and those of us that are interested in this area are obliged to pursue it. I'm encouraged by the initial results of some of my own work in this area that seems to show eye tracking to be a helpful tool in determining what learners attend to in native speaker corrective feedback during task-based SCMC. One thing's for sure, these records let us pinpoint linguistic features that seem to receive more consideration from learners in terms of the amount of time spent viewing those specific targets relative to other things that they viewed. With this information, one can then correlate it with some outcome. Staying with the focus on corrective feedback for a moment, one can determine to the millisecond how long a student looked at a certain aspect of text. The more visual heat maps illustrate relative amounts of attention to certain forms rather than looking at eye gaze duration specifically as a more continuous variable. So in other words, rather than looking at did a learner focus on an adjective ending for 1.32 seconds as opposed to 1.41 seconds, perhaps depending on the research questions, it's more appropriate to use a visual such as heat maps. So eye tracking technology was not designed to account for chat interactive text, and when we try to do this, it presents a whole new level of challenge in harvesting these rich data. More recently, my colleague Claire Renault and I, in Smith and Renault 2013, employed eye tracking technology in a study of teacher and student SCMC interaction. Learners' eye fixations were used as a measure of noticing corrective recast by the teacher. We examined the relationship between occurrence, number, and duration of fixations as independent variables and post-test success as a binomial dependent variable on various recast items. And also, we looked at the relationship between the nature of the recasts and the fixation duration. Results showed a positive relationship between noticing of lexical and grammatical form and post-test success. And we found suggestive effects for fixation number and post-test success, and for a number of targets in complex recasts and fixation duration. So it seems that eye tracking technology can be a useful tool for exploring at least attention to form. And I encourage others that are interested in trying out this relatively new methodological tool, in CALL at least, to do so. And thank you very much for your attention.